May the words of my mouth and the meditation of all our hearts be acceptable in your sight, Lord, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. It'll come as no surprise after this morning's reading to hear that I'm going to speak of the metaphor of the sheep and the shepherd. But I'd ask you to think for a moment, why is that metaphor of sheep and shepherd so appropriate to our relationship with God? References to shepherd appear throughout the Bible, the first reference being in Genesis and the last in the book of Revelation. The content of Psalm 23 are very familiar words to many people, words used on many occasions from times of great fear, times of great sadness, and also times of great joy. My late father was infuriated that on attending funerals at various crematorium, the hymn books always fell open at that page. And Psalm 23 is in great danger of becoming only of sentimental value to people. Have we, as he used to say, ceased to think of what the words mean and think more of the occasions that we use them? Yet, because it's so familiar and often of sentimental value, we must be careful not to go to the other extreme and rarely use it or speak of it at all. It is a great and powerful psalm. God is not referred to in the psalm as a king, sitting in a palace to rule over his people from some distant or majestic place, while we run around aimlessly trying to get by as best as we can, feeling sorry for ourselves when things don't go our way. David calls God a shepherd. Shepherds are unique in their profession because they don't, like factory workers and others, clock in and clock out. They don't live a separate life from the sheep that they watch over. Shepherds ate, slept, walked, fought, and lived right alongside the sheep. Where he went, they went. And where they went, he went. Many of us will have seen that relationship in person when we recall the old TV programme, One Man and His Dog, which is now brought back every year in Countryfile. And that series has brought the work of the shepherds into our lounges. The shepherd was out on the hillside, from steep escarpments to low valleys, in all weathers. His care was only for the sheep, not for himself. Calling on his teams of dogs to round up the sheep, prevent them from straying, and bring them to him in order that he could safely look after them in the pen. But at the time of David, shepherds would gather their sheep into pens at night. The walls of the sheepfolds were about 5 feet high and were made out of rock. Often briars or thorny branches were placed on top of the walls. And all this was done to keep the wolves and the mountain lions from getting to the sheep at night. The gate to the sheepfold was about 2 feet wide, and it wasn't made of rock or wood or sticks laced together. No, there was no gate. One of the shepherds was literally the gate. The shepherd would sleep there in the small, narrow opening of the rock wall. He would sleep there by the fire with his staff. And we're familiar with the image of the staff. We often refer to it as the shepherd's crook, the hook being there to help lift the sheep out of danger when they become trapped. And if a wolf should show up to try and get to the sheep, the shepherd would fight it off with his staff or with a short club called his rod. A king might know his citizens' needs, but he might forget them or ignore them while busying himself in his own palace. But the shepherd cannot ignore his sheep. He lives with them. experiences everything that they do, forgoes the luxuries of a king for the difficulties of life with sheep. The shepherd would risk injury. The shepherd would risk sacrificing his very life on behalf of the sheep. The shepherd didn't just guard the gate. The shepherd was the gate. The shepherd controlled who came in. Many people would run away if they saw a wolf approaching, but a good shepherd stayed right there as the gate and was willing to lay his life down for his sheep. In the book, A Shepherd Looks at Psalm 23, the author, Philip Keller, himself a shepherd, describes the fact that sheep need 4 things before they will lie down. And it's the shepherd's job to bring these 4 things. Due to the sheep's timidity, they must be free from all fear. Hence, quiet waters. Due to their sociability, they must be free from friction with other sheep. They must also be free of parasites and flies in order to relax. They must be free from hunger before they can relax and lay down. Shepherds provide the framework for the entire needs of sheep in everyday life, in all weathers and in all situations. Protection from enemies, guide to proper food, security and a sense of well-being, leading to adequate supplies of water, knowledge about dangers while travelling, the sense of greater power to handle the unknown, the knowledge that life is not lived alone or without purpose. Sheep can only see about 6 feet in front of itself, but when trusting and being led by the shepherd, it will remain content. I think you can probably see where I'm coming from. When we are in times of danger, times of fear, we often think of the 23rd Psalm. And that's because we are seeking reassurance. We are those sheep seeking the comfort of the shepherd. The Lord is my shepherd. He is there. If I place my trust in him, I will surely want for nothing. Some of you may know that I was a police officer in London for almost 30 years, working with the British Transport Police. And I recall only too vividly, in the aftermath of the horrific events in London of the 7th of July 2005, when I was placed in charge of police officers' welfare, having been down in the tunnels following the bombs. And I was told by several police officers engaged in some very difficult tasks that some of the injured that day were reciting the 23rd Psalm as they were waiting to be rescued. And that was something that stuck with those officers. Now, I don't know if those people referred to were Christians or had any faith, but they were seeking their shepherd to guide them away from danger, to protect them, to give them security and well-being. Are we more likely to call out to our shepherd only when we need his help? Or do we place our trust in him all of the time and not just at the unpleasant times? The shepherd is there for his sheep in good times as well as bad, in happy as well as sad. And some people hold a view that an unbeliever has no right to say this psalm. It is, in their opinion, only for those who can really say, "The Lord is my shepherd." But I can't agree with that view. The word Lord in the psalm is a translation of the word Jehovah from the Hebrew Bible, and that the word was the word that was used for the personal name of God. There are other words in Hebrew that are used for God, but Jehovah is emphasizing the commitment of God to his people, and that is to all people. Like the shepherd is committed to his sheep, and if he finds an injured or a lost one, he brings it to his fold. God has made a commitment to his people to be their shepherd, and he promised never to leave them or forsake them. It was the Lord who made this commitment. His love for people was such that he committed himself to us in spite of our failures and our weaknesses. One of my favourite hymns is I Will Sing the Wondrous Story, sadly not in CH4. But the line that I was lost, but Jesus found me, found the sheep that went astray, took my hand, gently led me to a better day. The shepherd is most certainly there for all his sheep. To use that well-used phrase now, the shepherd is there for the many, not the few. And surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life. And there can be no better conclusion than that. And how long can we expect that goodness and mercy? All the days of my life. So no matter what life throws at us, no matter how we've been affected by COVID, no matter how harshly done by we feel, no matter how we deal in fact or try to look at assumptions or suppositions, God will be, God is with us all the time. And whether it be as individuals or as a community that we feel torn apart, when in our darkest days we can still expect to find God's mercy. And how do we respond to that? I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. It's a powerful psalm. It shows God's love and care for us in our past, our present, and our future. In all the circumstances of our lives, God's presence and care will manifest itself. God is not a king ruling from a palace. He is a shepherd living with his sheep. Whether through the green pastures, the still waters, through the valley of the shadow of death, or in the presence of those who will try to harm us, he is always there. So why is the metaphor of the sheep and the shepherd so appropriate to our relationship with God? The Lord is my shepherd, and I will trust in him, and you can too. Amen.